Hello everyone, my name is Thumper, the Rabid Rabbit. Welcome to Chapter 1 of my 2021 Rust Electricity Guide. In Chapter 1, we'll be covering power sources, including the large solar panel, the wind turbine, and the small generator. Additionally, we'll be covering the root combiner, since it is important to managing power sources. We will not be covering the battery in Chapter 1. I'm saving those for Chapter 2. They are technically a power source when they are charged. They don't create their own electricity, so I'm going to put those off to the second chapter. The format of the Rust Electricity Guide is a little more long form and less formal than my component guide. If you're interested in details of individual components, check out the playlist for the component guide where I cover each component in detail in short little videos of like 3 to 5 minutes in a slightly more formal fashion. This is going to be a little more laid back and ad hoc, and I'm going to try and take you through groups of components as they relate to each other. So that's why Chapter 1 is about power sources. I do, however, recognize that some of you are probably new to the channel, so welcome. I'm going to cover a few basics for those of you who are new to Rust Electricity before we jump into things. So let me cover some things that you're really going to want to know. First of all, in my hand is the wire tool. The wire tool, let's bring it up on the menu here, is a default blueprint. You have it by default. You can craft these for 2 high quality metal. You're saying, Thumper, Jesus, high quality is a pain in the ass to get. Well, get used to it. If you're not used to getting high qual in large amounts, you're not going to have a very good time with electricity because most of the electrical components require some high quality metal. So find a good source and get some. Craft yourself a wire tool first because you're not going to get very far without it. All right, with the wire tool in my hand, I can show you some of the details of these components. First of all of the electrical components have these little white boxes that pop up when you have the wire tool in your hand. They're called handles. These are where you connect wires to. Outputs can be connected to inputs. Inputs cannot be connected to other inputs, and outputs cannot be connected to other outputs. The wire tool prevents you from doing this, so at least it will save you the trouble of that embarrassingly stupid mistake. Usually. You also see other information when you hover the wire tool over these handles. For example, looking at this large solar panel, you can see the electric output has the number 20. That's 20 units of power, or 20 rust watts. You'll hear me refer to units of power, units of electricity, and rust watts interchangeably. That's because I've been doing this since before they actually called them rust watts, and I don't give a crap what they are called, so I'll call them whatever the hell I want to. 20 rust watts is what you're seeing as this single integer number that pops up under the word empty. The word empty represents what this handle is connected to, which is nothing. Yep. All right. By contrast, if I go look at this battery, you will see that there are 2 handles that pop up, an input and an output, along with a table of information. Now, we'll get into batteries a little more in Chapter 2, but you will see something a little bit different there under the capacity indicator of rust watt minutes. That's what the RWM stands for. That's how many rust watts are remaining in the capacity of this battery. By default, a small battery that you see here actually comes with 20 rust watts in it. So it does have a little bit of free power when you start, but that won't last long. It has a maximum output of 10 rust watts. You can see that right above the capacity number, which means if you run this thing at its full output, you're only going to get 2 minutes of power. 10 units for 2 minutes is 20 rust watt minutes. That would be a dead battery. Better charge this thing up. You do that by taking the wire tool, clicking on the output handle of a power source, and clicking on the input source of the battery. You will then see the capacity number start ticking up slowly, and we'll get into the more details about how the battery charging works in Chapter 2. But what you do need to know now is if I take this output, let me disconnect that using the right mouse click. If I take this output from the battery, you'll see I cannot connect it to the output of the solar panel. So it does in fact prevent you from doing that. Very handy. All right, let's look at some common power consumers here. If I drag this wire from the output over, you'll see it only highlights the input on this auto turret or on this light. You'll also see some numbers floating in front of you. When it says no surface, that means there's nothing to connect to. When it's green and that word goes away, that means you can click and attach it to the ground, which visually is not working right now. That's handy. There we go. Bugs, everyone, in Rust. Can you imagine? Insanity. All right. The big number on top that's getting smaller, that's the maximum length of the wire. It starts at 30 meters and gets shorter the more wire you lay down. 30 meters is not the maximum length of a circuit, it's just the maximum length of any one wire. Once you run out of that, you do need to connect to a component and then start another wire. You can use various components to extend your circuits if all you need is length. But remember, it's not all about length, kids. Okay, so the one number on the bottom is the number of connection points that you can attach to a surface. So you can see I'm starting with 16, I click, now it's 15, 14, 13. So there you go. You can just keep connecting this to a surface, but eventually I'll run out of attachments and now I can click, 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 click. I can't connect to the wall anymore, but I can still finish this circuit. So there we go. Look at that beautiful artwork. Fantastic, isn't it? Aside from the obvious consumers like an auto turret and a light, if you are new to Rust electricity, you will also need to know that the components, like the branch, the blocker, the switches, like the AND switch, and pretty much everything consumes 1 unit of power, or 1 Rust watt. What does that mean? If this battery has an output of 10, which it does, and I connect it to this auto turret, let's connect it to the turret, you'll see that the auto turret powers up, because an auto turret takes 10 units of power minimum to run. So look at this Mr. Happy right here. He's got no gun, so I guess he's a little Mr. Angry. Now, if I take this 10 Rust watts and plug it into this blocker, you'll see that when I connect it to something else, like the turret doesn't turn on because the blocker used 1 unit of power, so now you'll see it's putting out 9 units. Well, 9's not enough to power Mr. Happy here, so plan ahead, kids. Remember that as you run your circuits through more components, the components themselves will continue to use units of power, and so you will run out of power eventually, and of course that means you may not have enough left over for what you were intending to do. So make sure you plan ahead the number of components you're going to use and have a proper power source. What a fantastic segue to the purpose of Chapter 1. The purpose of Chapter 1 is to talk about power sources. Ta-da! All right, let's generate power. One of my personal favorites, the large solar panel. The large solar panel, let's take a look here, not a default blueprint. I have it unlocked here, but it will not be unlocked for you by default. You can unlock it in the level 1 tech tree. You can also craft it on a level 1 workbench with high qual and tech trash. Easiest place to get one of these, run on over to the outpost with 75 scrap. You can buy large solar panels for 75 scrap at the outpost. By the way, if you happen to need high quality metal or tech trash for other components that you want to build, you can also buy large solar panels and recycle them at the outpost to get high quality metal and tech trash out of them. Right. Get that scrap, kids. All right. We are in the southern hemisphere, boys and girls, in this game. So where's the sun? Hey, look, it's to the north. All right. At least it looks like it's to the north because that's where it's visually rendered in the game. Generally, this comes with exceptions, but generally you're going to want to point the solar panels to the north for their maximum power. When it's pointed to the north here, you can see getting 20 units of electricity. The other exception is that it does need to be at full health. If I were to pick this up and then place it back down again, you will see it is now at 75 of 100 health. That's only 75% of its health. And you will see that it only puts out 15 Rust watts, 75% of its maximum power. That's right. If people shoot them, or if you pick them up and put them down, you're gonna have to repair them or they won't put out their maximum output capability. So there we go. I repair it. And now I get 20 units of power. So make sure they're full health. Make sure they're facing into the sun, generally to the north. Generally. What is the biggest exception to this? Well, in the morning and evening, the sun will be east and west, so you won't get a full 20 watts. But another interesting exception is on large islands. If you are living on the north side of the island, there are occasions where the sun source is actually to the south of your position. It kind of runs across the top third of the island. I have a very lengthy video on this on my channel. I might even be lazy enough to put that link for you in the description. Probably not, but we'll see. Suffice it to say that if you happen to be living on the north side of a very large island, there may be cases where you need to face your solar panels to the south to get their full output for most of the day. Don't ask. It's really quirky. In general, just face them to the north. All right? Cool. These don't have any regular maintenance to them, but they only work during daylight hours. That is, of course, an advantage and disadvantage. You don't really have to do anything with them, and they're consistent in their output. If they're putting out 20 today, they're going to put out 20 at the same time tomorrow. So you can kind of get used to what you're going to get out of these things. But they do you no good at night, so you're definitely going to want to combine them with some batteries if you do want to use your electricity at night. And most folks do, okay? Okay, so let's move on to a less consistent power producer who happens to work daytime and nighttime. That's the wind turbine. The wind turbine has one output handle here on the box in the middle. Right now it's putting out, whoa, 95. Hey, that's pretty good for sea level. These things work best when you put them at higher elevations. The higher up they are, the more power they tend to put out, and the more consistently they tend to put that power out. My personal preference is to get these at least 6 to 9 stories tall, 9 being ideal. If you get this up to 9 stories tall, you're generally going to see power almost all the time, and you're generally going to see it over 100 rust watts. Down here at the surface, it could go to 0. It could go up to its maximum of 150. That's right. You can get 150 rust watts out of a wind turbine when it's running at full power. You're not very likely to see that unless you get it up nice and high. You do need to avoid obstacles when placing wind turbines. If they are within 3 foundations of a cliff or a wall, it will block the wind from getting to them. So if I were to build a wall, you can see it's facing this direction. That's where the wind is coming from, southwest. If I build a 3 or 2 story tall wall right over here, that wind turbine will stop moving. So yes, kids, you can block the wind. So get them up high and keep them free of obstacles, and they will give you their best performance. They also cannot be placed right next to each other. Let me grab one here and show you that. You'll see I can't put one within 2 foundations of another wind turbine, but if I get far enough away, you'll see now I can place another one. By default, that opening where the handle to connect is off to my left. You can kind of see it here. If I rotate once, it rotates away from me. Rotate again, it's to my right. Rotate again, and now it's facing towards me. So this is all aesthetics. You can connect to this thing. It's a little easier to connect to it from the open side, but you can connect to it from any direction. And the blades rotate into the wind. So, you know, place these facing whatever direction you want to. It really doesn't matter. It's mostly for the convenience of connecting to them and the aesthetics. So if I place this like this, you'll see it's open to me here. And as soon as I place it, you'll see the blade rotates around into the wind and then starts turning. So there you go. This guy's putting out 72. You don't have to go far for these to vary. This one is putting out 74. So different areas on the map give you different wind conditions at different times. But remember, rule of thumb, get them up high. Also subject to attack, so you may have to repair these things too. That's a big disadvantage of both the solar and wind. They both have to be outside where they can be attacked. I didn't really talk about the stats on this thing, so let's talk about the wind turbine stats before I move on. It is level 2. You can craft it on a workbench and unlock it in the level 2 tech tree. It takes a little bit more to craft. Sheet metal is a pain in the butt to find sometimes. So run on over to the bandit camp, not the outpost, the bandit camp. And you can buy these things for 500 scrap. Little pricey, but worth it because they can put out quite a bit of power. So Me personally, the first thing I do in game is go to the bandit camp, buy myself a wind turbine and a medium battery, and get to work. All right. What else should I cover here? They do work well in combination with solar panels because they do provide power at night. So between solar and wind and a battery, you can tend to keep your stuff running during the day, keep it charged up, and supplement it at night. So we'll get into more examples of that in the future. But if you really need consistent power and you don't want to leave your cheese in the wind, here's the answer: the small generator. Go take a look at the small generator specs. It is also a level 2 item. Unlock it in the tier 2 tech tree, crafted on a workbench with high quality gears. But you need fuel. It takes low grade fuel to power this thing. When it's running, it always gives you 40 units of power. That's great. Day, night, and you can place it inside, deep in your base where it's hard for someone to attack. So that makes it a great defensible power source. But it's kind of a luxury item unless you're just flush with low-grade fuel. So remember, does burn fuel. It can hold. Let me press and hold and go to open container. It holds 500 units of low-grade as a full tank of fuel. That 500 units of low-grade will burn for 2 hours even. So you'll get 2 hours of 40 rust watts on one tank of low-grade fuel. If you look at the component guide, you'll see there's some tricks to how this burns. It doesn't burn at exactly an even rate, but it does burn such that it runs out after exactly 2 hours. It shouldn't. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but if you want more on that, go look it up in the component guide. All right. You can buy these at the outpost, 125 scraps. So if you need to get your hands on one early in game, they aren't too terribly expensive, but remember, you're going to need the low grade to run it. So there's that. All right. You know, while I'm talking about the generator, we should talk about not only does it have an output for the 40 units of power it produces. Let me turn it on here. There you go. 40 units of power. It has two other handles. So unlike the solar panel and wind that only have an output, the generator also has two more. It has a force start. This is an input. And a force stop, also an input. You can automate the use of the small generator by using these two handles. You can turn it on and off by hand, but you can also turn it on and off by applying power to one of these handles. Let me show you a quick example. I'll just take the power from this wind turbine, and I'm going to connect it to the force start. And there you go. You apply any amount of power for any amount of time to the force start, and boop, it switches on. If I take that same power source and I go connect it to the off handle, the force stop handle, boom, it stops the generator. So that's how that works. You use those for automation. Some practical examples of that, if you wanted to use the generator as a backup, so when you run out of power somewhere else or you need more power, you can use your logical circuits to create an event that fires this thing up or shuts it down when you don't need to be burning the fuel. All right. By default, let me put one of these in my inventory. I want to show you another trick. By default, when you place this thing, it's placed with the handles all away from you. So you'll have to rotate it around if you want the handles facing you. When the wheels are to your right, the handles are facing you. By default, the wheels are to your left, the handles are facing away from you. Remember that, because if you put it against a wall, then it becomes a huge pain in the ass to try and connect to these things, because they're over here and then I'd fall in the water and that just sucks. Okay. If it's a wall, it might be really hard to reach. Okay. I promised you long form. We're up to 20 minutes, so let's see if we can't wrap this up with one last component, the root combiner. Oh, you know what? Since we're talking about generators, you see this guy here. You're going to see me use this thing in some videos. It's a test generator. This is an admin spawn. You can't buy these or use these on regular unmodded servers. On modded servers, admins may give them to you. Admins may sell them in shops, but on vanilla, you're not going to find a test generator. It's a cheat. It gives you 100 units of power for nothing. So if you're on a server that has these, grab one. They're very handy. It's nice to have 100 units of power day, night with no fuel. But it is an admin spawn component, not a default component. So do not go looking for this thing on a regular server. Okay, let's get to our friend, the red box, the root combiner, my good friend here. Okay, so the root combiner, level 1 item, not a default blueprint. You're gonna have to research this thing or unlock it in the tech tree. There's not really anywhere to buy it as of the filming of this, but I do want to call your attention to the description here. This object combines 2 root electrical sources into a single signal. Say that 5 times fast. You can string together any power source. That's the important word there, source. So solar, wind, generator, or battery for the purpose of the combiner. You cannot combine anything else in line with this. So even if I put any component in line here, let me just grab a memory cell. If I put a memory cell in line here between, let me grab the wind power and put it here, and then take the output, which is still right here connected. Boop. See, disappears. Doesn't work. Nada. Nope. Not gonna happen. Can't do it. Wouldn't be prudent. There you go. So you can only use this thing to combine power sources. This is a common complaint I hear from folks, like you build 2 beautiful circuits and you have a bunch of power left over at the end, and you want to take that leftover power and combine it into one circuit to use it up for something else. Well, you can't do that. You only use it off of sources. So get over it now. That's just how this works. All right. Now, what do you use this thing for? Well, you use it for putting more than one power source together. So let's play around with this a little bit here before we finish up. First of all, let's just start with a basic example. Let's take 2 different things here. Let's take the solar panel, put it on one of the inputs, and then I'm going to take the other input and connect it to this wind turbine, who's given us, what do we got right now? 99. So 99 plus 20. We get 119. Of course, that will change over time because the wind output will keep changing. But that's a pretty good power source right there. 119 rust watts. We can do quite a bit with that. But if we wanted more, we can place another root combiner and we can chain these together. So if I put that in the one side and then I take this over here, hook it up to another wind turbine, now we've got all 3 of these combined together, and we're getting 210. But wait, there's more. All right, 210 isn't enough for me. I want some more consistent power. I'm going to turn on this generator. I'm going to take its 40 units, and I'm going to add it in. And now we're up to 243. The wind is blowing well, but this is quite a bit of power to work with. This is what you use the root combiners for. Combining different sources of power that might give you better redundancy or resiliency in your power, or just for combining a number of sources to get a larger, higher capacity circuit for running whatever it is you need to run. So for example, turrets take 10. So with 235 here, technically we could run 23 turrets. Not exactly, because remember I told you all these components that you would use to split this power out to the different turbine or different auto turrets are going to use some power themselves. But you could probably get a good 20 turrets running off this power source without much trouble. So that's pretty darn good. All right, let's review. Oh, I totally forgot to mention, another thing about components is some of them can only be placed on the floor, some of them can only be placed on walls, some can be placed on both. Root combiner is one of those things that can be placed on the wall and the floor. Most of these small little modular components like this, like the branch and the blocker, can be placed on walls and floors. The AND switch, most of the switches can only be placed up on the wall. You can't put an AND switch on the floor, so that's another basic thing to remember. Okay, yes. We went over rust watts and rust watt minutes. We went over the wire tool. We went over the large solar panel, the wind turbine, the small generator as your power sources, and of course your root combiner for putting that all together. That is 25 minutes of fun, and that's probably going to be about the usual limit I'm going to try to stick to on these chapters. So I will leave you with that. If you have comments or questions, please leave them below. And you can check out the component guide playlist for more details on the various components. I promise you, by the time you see this, that guide will be out of date, but I do try to update it, so please check that out and provide comments there as well. Good luck, and don't suck.